script with CTAs inserted at approximately 20%, 45%, and 80%, 3 CTAs total. The first humans to see a dragon did not see it with their eyes. They saw it in the bone. In the sand-scoured dark of a cave somewhere in the Levant, 40,000 years ago, a shaman pressed her palm to the limestone wall, and in the flicker of a tallow lamp, saw the ridge of the rock become a spine. The uneven ceiling became a jaw. The shadows between the stalactites became the gaps in a set of teeth too large for any animal she had ever tracked. She did not name it, but she painted it, and she was not the only one. Here is the strange part. From the frozen tundra of Siberia to the monsoon forests of the Malay archipelago, from the high deserts of the Andes to the river valleys of West Africa, the same shape appears, a serpent with limbs, a scaled thing that breathes fire or flood, a guardian of a threshold you are not meant to cross. The dragon is the most universal monster in the human imagination, and it has no single point of origin. It did not spread from one culture to another like a rumor. It erupted independently, in isolation, again and again. Think about that. Every human culture that left a record of its inner world invented the dragon. The Sumerians had Tiamat. The Egyptians had the Uraeus. The Greeks had Typhon, the father of monsters. The Norse had Nidhogger. The Chinese had the Lung. The Aztecs had Quetzalcoatl. The Zulu had the Incanjamba. The Christian medieval world had the devil as a red serpent. And all of them, from the cuneiform tablets of Babylon to the illuminated manuscripts of Europe, describe the same creature with the same emotional weight: awe, terror, reverence, hunger. The old answer was simple. Ancestors found dinosaur bones, giant femurs poking out of eroding cliffs. They did not know what they were, so they imagined a living beast that matched the bone. A dragon. Case closed. But that raises a darker question. If the dragon was just a misidentified fossil, why did the cultures that never lived near dinosaur skeletons still paint the same beast? Why did the Tlingit of the Pacific Northwest, whose geology produced few large fossils, carve the same scaled serpent onto their totems? Why did the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, whose continent holds some of the oldest dinosaur fossils on Earth, but whose oral traditions predate the scientific discovery of those bones by tens of thousands of years, describe but a rainbow serpent that shaped the land? The answer cannot be geology. Geology does not have a memory, but the human body does. Here is what nobody noticed. The dragon is not a fossil. The dragon is a template, a pattern your brain inherited from the deep past and has been projecting onto the world for tens of thousands of years. And the evidence for this is not carved in stone. It is written in the architecture of your skull. That word, template, is the first crack in the old story. Most people never get past the dinosaur explanation because it feels clean. But the real question is not where the dragon came from. The real question is why your brain already knew the shape before you saw it. If you want to follow this thread deeper to see where the template actually lives and how it rewrites everything you think you know about fear, subscribe, because the evidence is not in the ground. It is in the 40 millisecond gap between the image and the scream. And in the comments, tell me the one thing you feared as a child that you never saw clearly. The shape in the corner. The thing under the bed. Name it if you can. An fMRI study conducted by Oman and Maineka in 2001 scanned the brains of participants who had never seen a snake in real life, urban dwellers from Northern Europe. Their amygdala, the twin almond-shaped clusters of nuclei that process fear and threat detection, lit up identically when they saw an image of a snake as when they saw a predator. But here's the specific finding that most people miss. The response was faster. The amygdala activated within 40 milliseconds of the snake image, faster than the brain could consciously identify what it was seeing. And this fast circuit fear was not present for images of cars or guns or knives, all of which are objectively more dangerous to a modern human than a snake. The brain is not a neutral observer. It is a survival machine optimized for a world that no longer exists. And that machine has a specific fear profile for a specific kind of predator: elongated, limbless, scaled, and moving close to the ground. These triggers are so ancient that they predate the human species itself. They were refined in the brains of our primate ancestors, who lived among constrictors and venomous serpents for 60 million years before the first Homo sapiens stood upright. By the time you emerged from the African savanna, your brain already had a carved channel dedicated to the shape of a serpent. But that is too neat. The real answer is stranger. Because the dragon is not just a snake. The dragon has wings. It has claws. It breathes fire. And no single predator in our evolutionary past combines all these features. So why does the template combine them? Why does the universal monster have 4 legs and 2 wings, and a forked tongue, and a coat of scales? Why does it guard treasure? Why does it hoard gold? Why does it demand sacrifice? This is where the real machinery shows itself. The dragon is not an evolutionary relic of one predator. It is a composite portrait of every predator that ever hunted us in the dark. The scales come from the snake. The claws come from the eagle, the bear, the big cat. The wings come from the raptor that could snatch a child from a clearing. The fire comes from the lightning strike that turned a dry forest into an inferno, or the volcanic eruption that buried entire villages in ash. The dragon is the brain's way of compressing every existential threat into a single image that can be recognized at a glance. It is a summed cognitive threat, a terror logogram. Hold on. If the dragon is a composite portrait of ancient predators, why does it appear in the sacred texts of the world's major religions? Why is it not just a monster but a character in the creation stories, the apocalypse narratives, the moral parables? Why is Tiamat cut in half by Marduk to form the sky and the earth? Why is Typhon buried under Mount Etna, his struggles causing earthquakes? Why is the great red dragon in the book of Revelation cast down from heaven by the archangel Michael? Why does the woman Indra slay the serpent Vritra to release the waters? Why does the Norse Thor fish for the Midgard serpent at Ragnarok? Pause here. The old explanation was that religion uses the dragon as a symbol of chaos that must be subdued by order. The god represents civilization. The dragon represents the wild, and that is true as far as it goes. But it does not explain why the dragon is also the guardian of wisdom, why the Chinese lung is a benevolent force that controls rain and rivers and is associated with the emperor and the mandate of heaven. Why the Gnosticophytes revered the serpent in the Garden of Eden as the bringer of knowledge. Why Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, is the god of wind, learning, and the morning star. This is the strange pivot that most analyses never make. The dragon is not just threat, it is also teacher. Every culture that placed the dragon at the center of its sacred stories was describing the same psychological reality. The boundary is not just dangerous, it is also where knowledge lives. If you are willing to go deeper into this architecture with us, to sit at that boundary and see what the mind reveals when it stops running, subscribe. This channel exists for the people who feel the weight of that threshold and want to understand what shaped it. And in the comments, drop the word you would use for a dragon that guards something you have to reach. Whether that word is guardian, test, sentinel, or something older. A cross-cultural study of child development conducted by Rahman and colleagues in 1974 found something that the textbooks do not emphasize. Children who had never been taught to fear snakes, who had no exposure to stories about dragons, showed a measurable startle response to images of serpents at a higher intensity than to images of any other animal. And this response emerged at the same developmental stage across every culture studied, regardless of whether the child lived in a region with venomous snakes or a region where snakes were absent. The fear was not learned. It was released. The amygdala does not learn to fear the serpent. It is already prepared to fear it. All it needs is the trigger. And once the trigger is activated, the brain does not just feel fear. It creates a story about the fear. The child who startles at the garden hose, the adult whose skin crawls at the shadow of a branch in the corner of a room. The brain immediately invents a cause for the alarm. Something was there. Something moved. Something with scales, with hunger, with eyes that do not blink. Here's the part most people miss. The brain does not passively receive the world. It actively constructs it. And when the threat detection system is activated, the brain fills in the details of the threat using the templates it inherited. The shaman in the Levantine cave did not see a dragon. She saw a rock formation and her brain completed the pattern. The pattern was ancient. The pattern was universal. And she painted exactly what her brain told her was there. The same brain that is inside your skull right now. But we should be careful. That would be too neat. If the dragon is just a misperception of rock and shadow, why did it become the central symbol of so many religious traditions? Why is it not just a momentary illusion but a permanent fixture in the architecture of belief? The answer is psychological, yes, but it is not simple. The dragon is not a mistake. The dragon is a tool. When the ancient brain needed to explain death, plague, famine, flood, drought, and the collapse of entire civilizations, it did not have the concept of natural law. It did not have germ theory, or plate tectonics, or climate science. It had one explanatory framework: agency. Something caused this suffering, something with intention, something that could be negotiated with, propitiated, bribed, or fought. And the shape that intention took was the dragon. You are the inheritor of that brain. when you feel a chill in a room for no reason, when your hair stands on end in a place where nothing is visible, when you feel that you are being watched by something that does not blink, you are not experiencing a supernatural intrusion. You are experiencing the activation of an ancient circuit, a circuit that your ancestors called the presence of a god, or a demon, or a dragon. The fMRI data tells us that the amygdala does not distinguish between a real snake and an image of a snake, but it also does not distinguish between a real threat and a remembered threat. If you have ever been bitten by a dog, your brain will treat every subsequent dog with the same vigilance. If your ancestors were hunted by snakes and eagles and big cats for millions of years, your brain will treat every shadow that resembles those predators with the same vigilance. And if your brain cannot find a predator in the shadow, it will invent one, because a false positive is safer than a false negative. That is the evolutionary logic of the dragon. The dragon is the false positive that kept your ancestors alive long enough to become your ancestors. The shaman who painted the dragon on the cave wall was not lying. She was painting the shape of her own survival. And she was passing that shape down through generations, embedding it in the rituals, the stories, the taboos, the sacrifices, and the gods. By the time a culture writes its first creation myth, the dragon is already there. It has always been there, because it was there before the culture existed. It was there in the brain that the culture was built from. Think about what that means. Every religion that has a dragon is not describing an external encounter. It is describing an internal architecture. The dragon is the shape your brain gives to the unknown when the unknown threatens to destroy you. The dragon is the shape of your own fear, projected outward and worshipped or fought. Now here is the uncomfortable truth. You have met this dragon. It has your face. When you lie awake at 3 a.m. and your mind replays every failure, every shame, every moment of missed opportunity, you are not thinking. You are being hunted. The voice that whispers that you are not enough, that you will fail again, that the catastrophe you fear is already in motion. That voice has scales, it has wings, it has a forked tongue, and a hunger that does not sleep. And it has your voice, because it came from your brain. The same brain that painted the dragon on the cave wall 40,000 years ago is painting the dragon on the ceiling of your bedroom right now. Read those words again. The voice that hunts you at 3 a.m. has your voice. That is not an abstraction. That is the same neural circuit that has been running uninterrupted for 60 million years, and it does not care that your bedroom is safe. It only cares that your heart is still beating. Before you lose this moment, before the next thought pulls you away, subscribe. Because if you carry this understanding with you, the next time the dragon speaks in the dark, you will recognize whose face it wears, and in the comments write exactly one sentence that voice says to you at 3 a.m. Not the interpretation, the sentence, the exact words. Let them see the shape of it. The therapists call it anxiety. The shamans called it the devourer. When your pulse quickens and your chest tightens and you feel that something terrible is about to happen, it is not a chemical imbalance. It is your ancestors' threat detection system, still running on the same circuit, still looking for the predator in the dark. The predator is not there, but the circuit does not care. It was not designed to care. It was designed to survive, and that is where the transformation happens. Understanding the machine does not turn it off, but understanding the machine changes what it means to hear the dragon's voice. You are not cursed. You are not weak. You are carrying a 6 million-year-old survival instrument, and the dragon is not your enemy. The dragon is the guardian of what you have not yet faced. Every culture that interacted with the dragon emerged on the other side changed. Marduk becomes the king of the gods after he defeats Tiamat. Indra becomes the lord of the storm after he slays Vritra. The hero who faces the dragon is always transformed by the encounter, not because the dragon dies, because the hero enters the boundary, the unknown, the chaos, and returns with something that was hidden there. You are standing at the mouth of that cave right now. The painting on the wall is your own mind. The dragon inside it has your eyes. And the question is not whether you will fight it. The question is whether you will recognize it for what it is, the shape of your own survival, inherited from a line of ancestors who lived and died, so that you could stand here, in this moment, feeling exactly what they felt. There is a reason the dragon appears at the beginning and the end of every sacred story. It is the first thing your brain projects onto the unknown, and it will be the last thing you see when the unknown closes in. Not because it is real, but because your brain will always paint a face on the darkness before it can stand the darkness itself. And the face it paints will always be the same. The question you cannot answer yet is what waits on the other side. Every initiate who entered the dragon's cave and emerged alive carried back a different answer. And the difference between those answers is the difference between a mind that fears its own machinery and a mind that finally learns to read the shape of its own shadow.